Is a nation that built the Iron Dome now risking gaps in its own air defenses as it reaches outward to protect partners in a turbulent region? Tonight, we trace a growing unease inside Israel's security establishment, a story of stretched systems, contested choices, and the wrenching trade-offs that come when defense priorities collide with diplomatic opportunity. For 2 decades, the Iron Dome has been shorthand for Israel's ability to blunt incoming rockets and missiles aimed at population centers. Designed as a selective, cost-conscious shield, the system became a symbol of resilience and technological edge. Yet a recent government assessment made public in a high-profile investigation has raised a stark question. Have decisions in Jerusalem left Israel thinner at home even as it deploys that same shield abroad? According to the assessment reviewed by investigators, senior officials in the defense ministry warned decision-makers about mounting strain on Interceptor stocks after a CA short but intense confrontation in 2024. That 12-day campaign, the document says, left arsenals taxed. Interceptor production, the assessment found, was not accelerating at the pace required to keep up with the region's changing missile calculus. The report suggests that for every additional Interceptor Israel could afford to build, Iran and other adversaries were producing multiple attack missiles. It is a simple, alarming arithmetic. When incoming volumes rise faster than the capacity to stop them, strategic posture shifts from confident defense to vulnerability. The probe says that proposals to increase funding for Interceptor production were presented to the government and then declined. Appeals from senior defense officials, it notes, did not prompt emergency deliberations at the cabinet level or a rapid decision to accelerate manufacturing. Those procedural pauses, deliberate or not, have drawn sharp criticism from within the security community. One Israeli defense official, speaking candidly to investigators, called the absence of urgent action a serious strategic oversight. In his words, the Iranians fire at us twice, hundreds of missiles, and it doesn't move anything. He added, after the Netanyahu committee, they already knew they were heading toward a possible attack on Iran, and still nothing moved. It's clear to everyone there aren't enough A-3s. Those comments lay bare 2 linked concerns. First, that the quantity of interceptors available to respond to massed attacks may be inadequate. And second, that political judgment did not respond to a clear warning. It is one thing to accept risk as a calculated choice. It is another to ignore an alarm signal from the professionals whose responsibility it is to keep the country safe. Compounding the controversy are recorded remarks attributed to Israel's finance minister in meetings described by the investigative team. He reportedly acknowledged the scale of the challenge in blunt terms. Anyways, we won't be able to deal with Iran's surface-to-surface missiles. They have many more missiles than we have interceptors, and the only way is to attack them, not invest in defense. If the attribution is accurate, the statement reflects a strategic position, a preference to rely on offensive action against missile arsenals rather than to allocate more resources to defensive stockpiles. That choice, political and philosophical as much as financial, is at the heart of the debate. These revelations arrive as Israel has taken an unprecedented step, deploying an Iron Dome battery and Israeli Defense Forces personnel to help defend a Gulf partner. Reports indicate that early in the wider Iran conflict, an Iron Dome unit was sent to the United Arab Emirates and operated on Emirati soil. Officials describe this as the first operational use of the system outside Israel and the United States. On at least one occasion, that deployed unit reportedly intercepted incoming missiles, while the presence of ALI personnel in the UAE underscored an unusual, high-stakes level of cooperation between the 2 countries. That deployment is historic in its own right. For years, the Iron Dome was an instrument of national defense, a home front shield for Israeli cities. Its use on foreign soil signals 2 things simultaneously: the strengthening of military ties between Israel and regional partners, and the reality that the missile threat has spread beyond any single border. But the move also intensified domestic questions. If an asset so central to homeland protection is committed abroad, what does that mean for Israel's domestic defensive depth? Strategic tensions are stark. On the one hand, extending protection to partners in the Gulf Alliance with broader policy objectives, deepening alliances, deterring further aggression, and demonstrating solidarity with states facing sustained attacks. On the other hand, those same actions can cause consternation among officials who worry about depot, adding interceptors and the industrial capacity needed to replenish them. The Israeli defense official who spoke to the investigators was emphatic. The scale of Iran's missile production, he warned, simply outstrips the ability to respond on a one-to-one basis with interceptors. If the reported numbers are even approximately correct, the implications are sobering. Modern missile arsenals, particularly when masked with cruise missiles and drones, as well as ballistic munitions, can overwhelm layered defenses. Interceptors are expensive and finite. Production lines can be ramped up, but only with advanced planning, capital investment, and political will. When demand suddenly surges, the lead time to build and deploy additional batteries or to procure greater numbers of interceptors can be measured in months or years, not days. The assessment's account of internal discussions is instructive. It describes a documented recommendation to allocate additional funds to interceptor procurement. That was not adopted. It recounts the voice of a finance minister skeptical of pouring funds into a defensive program when offensive options existed. It depicts a political calculus in which deterrence and preemptive action are elevated as the most effective counters to missile proliferation. For some in the security establishment, however, the refusal to bolster defenses represented a failure to hedge risk, to preserve a margin of safety that can absorb hurried or unexpected attacks. There is a human dimension to these policy choices. Men and women on alert lines, civil defense officials coordinating evacuations, and families who spent nights in shelters during past barrages all live with the consequences of preparedness decisions. The logic of deterrence may keep missiles from being fired at all. But as recent campaigns have shown, deterrence can fray, miscalculate, or be breached. That reality is why both offensive and defensive capacities matter in tandem. Another piece of the puzzle is the public signaling that accompanies these decisions. Deploying Iron Dome to assist the UAE sent a message of regional solidarity and technological partnership. It solidified ties made public by high-level conversations between national leaders. At the same time, the optics of sending homegrown defenses abroad when domestic interceptors are limited fed a political narrative questioning whether Jerusalem's priorities match the needs on the ground. The report also details strikes attributed to Israeli forces aimed at degrading missile launch capabilities in southern Iran. Those actions, officials said, were designed to neutralize launch infrastructure before missiles could threaten regional targets. Offensive operations of that kind are part of a broader strategy to shift the balance in real time to take on adversary capacity before it can be employed. But such strikes, even when tactically effective, do not on their own address the longer-term industrial imbalance lied by the proliferation and manufacture of missile systems. This is where the industrial and fiscal elements come into focus. Interceptors are built by defense companies with finite manufacturing capacity. Scaling production requires investment, workforce expansion, supply chain resilience, and, importantly, uninterrupted political support. The Channel 12 assessment suggests that such investment was not treated as a priority when warnings first emerged. The result, a gap between strategic need and production capability, at least in the view of the defense officials who testified. The domestic political context matters here as well. Israel's government is operating in an intensely polarized environment, balancing budgetary constraints, competing security priorities, and a calculus about how best to deter a nuclear-capable adversary's missile capability. When a finance minister argues that the only real solution is to attack them, not invest in defense, he is making a normative claw about deterrence, escalation, and the allocation of scarce resources. Critics will argue that a balanced approach combining offensive targeting of production sites with robust defenses for civilian protection is a prudent path. Supporters of a more offensive posture will counter that investment in suppression, and interdiction can, over time, produce greater strategic effect than a round-the-clock defensive posture that invites arms races in interceptors. For external partners, particularly Gulf states that have themselves been targets, Israel's willingness to dispatch Iron Dome units is a tangible reassurance. It signals a readiness to share sensitive systems and to commit forces in defense of shared interests. For Israel's leadership, that kind of forward defense has diplomatic and strategic value. It cements alliances, enhances intelligence sharing, and demonstrates technological reach. Yet every choice to commit hardware and personnel externally carries the implicit question of opportunity cost. What are we not able to do at home because we chose to help there? The investigation also raises governance questions. How should a democracy make rapid, high-stakes decisions when the threat environment changes quickly? Who gets the final say in prioritizing procurement, and what thresholds of risk should trigger emergency production orders? The report implies that existing processes did not, in this case, produce the kind of urgent response some defense officials expected. That has prompted calls for clear procedures, more transparent deliberations, and a recalibrated approach to long-term industrial planning for critical defense systems. Beyond immediate procurement, the debate touches deeper questions about military strategy in an era of proliferating missiles and unmanned systems. Do nations double down on active defenses that intercept threats in flight? Do they diversify with electronic warfare, point defenses, and hardening of infrastructure? Do they? Invest in longer-range offensive options to keep adversaries at bay? The answer is likely to be a combination, but determining the right mix requires not only military judgment, but also political consensus and industrial foresight. For ordinary Israelis, the stakes are visceral. The calculus of civil defense, of warning times, of the number of interceptors needed to protect a city during a massed volley is not an academic exercise. It is about whether children can sleep in their homes without the sound of sirens. It is about whether critical infrastructure, hospitals, power grids, water systems can continue to function under sustained attack. Those are the practical metrics by which many will judge whether recent decisions were prudent. Regionally, the dynamic is no less consequential. If Iran or any actor with access to missile production lines can produce salvos of missiles faster than defenders can replenish interceptors, then the balance of risk shifts. Allies may press for greater sharing of capabilities or for joint procurement and production arrangements. Rival states may see asymmetric opportunities to erode the defensive advantages of their adversaries. The diffusion of missile technology and the advent of low-cost swarm tactics make this a truly modern strategic problem. What emerges from the assessment and the aftermath of the investigation is not a single villain or a simple failing. It is the collision of different logics: fiscal conservatism versus operational preparedness, offensive deterrence versus defensive resilience, diplomatic solidarity versus domestic security cushions. Each choice carries benefits and costs, and each is debated in the quarters of power by people confronting both technical realities and political constraints. As the debate continues, the central challenge for Israel and for any state facing similar threats will be to align strategy, procurement, and politics so that the nation can deter adversaries, protect its people, and honor security commitments to partners. That will mean honest assessments of industrial capacity, transparent decision-making about defense spending, and a willingness to invest in the kind of surge production capabilities that can respond to crises when they occur. The story laid out in the investigation is a reminder that defense is not merely a matter of technology. It is an ecosystem of policy, industry, and politics. Systems like Iron Dome do not operate in isolation. They are only as resilient as the supply lines and choices that sustain them. When missile threats multiply, so must the foresight that prevents critical shortfalls. In the days ahead, questions will center on whether lessons are learned, whether production lines are expanded, budgets adjusted, and processes reformed to ensure that warning signs produce action. Political leaders will have to weigh the visible gains of helping a partner in crisis against the less visible costs of potential vulnerability. Lead at home. Defense officials will press for clarity and resources. Financiers will weigh long-term budgets against immediate operational needs. Citizens will watch and demand assurance that their safety is the first priority. The debate over interceptors, offensive options, and regional cooperation is far from academic. It shapes the shape of security in a neighborhood where missiles, drones, and diplomacy intersect. How Israel navigates this difficult moment will be watched closely not only by its own people, but by allies and adversaries across the Middle East and beyond. The choices made now will reverberate for years in factories and budgets and in the lives of civilians who ultimately depend on the decisions that leaders make in times of calm and in moments of crisis.